In this video, we're going to be taking a quick look at the different document types that are available within Vortex Studio. As you can see, there are 6 different types of documents that you can create within the editor. We have the scene, the mechanism, the assembly, the part, the graphics gallery, and the setup. Each of these has a very specific purpose within the Vortex Studio environment. If we first take a look at scenes, scenes are complete environments where we're going to be running a simulation. Now, they'll typically include terrain where the simulation will take place, along with multiple different virtual equipments that we're going to be simulating in that environment. These equipments are the mechanisms. And so if I take a look here at the excavator mechanism that we just saw by itself, this is a mechanism file. Within the mechanism file, we can define all of the mechanics of the machine. That being said, a lot of that actually occurs in some of these sub-documents, namely the assembly and the part that could be found inside of a mechanism. So if I look at this mechanism on the left-hand side, I'll see that I have an assembly folder, and in this case we have a single assembly representing the excavator. It is possible, though, to create mechanisms that would have multiple assemblies, multiple groupings of parts that could be combined to create one single mechanism. Now in this example, we do have a single assembly, and that's what I can see here when I go to my excavator assembly. Now here, the assembly is going to be a grouping of all of the different parts that make up the machine and how these parts are going to be related to each other. So in this document, we'll find things like constraints and part definitions. Now the parts themselves actually live in separate documents. And so here, if I take a look at the part for the front section of the arm of the boom, that's going to be a part. So that's really the lowest level element that we're going to be able to find within Vortex. Now in a part, what we're doing is we're associating an element of the 3D model with some collision geometry, some mass information, some material classification data. So that's the lowest level item you can find within Vortex. The 2 other types of documents that we saw on the first screen are the graphics gallery and the configuration, or I should say setup document. So the graphics gallery is where we can load 3D assets inside of Vortex. So in this document, we store all the data that comes in from external 3D files. That includes the geometry for the model. It also includes things like material definitions, textures. Those all come in inside of the 3D model, and then we can visualize that data inside of the graphics gallery and even make some minor modifications like changing centers of different visual parts or being able to manipulate some of the hierarchy inside of the 3D model. The last document type that we have is the setup document. The setup document lets us configure how we're going to be deploying the content that we're creating within the Vortex Studio Editor. Now that content could be deployed on a single screen or, as we're seeing here, on the multi-screen system. In that case, we might actually be running applications across multiple computers and want to have screens that are going to be oriented in different ways, give us a full view inside of the virtual environment that we're simulating. So here we're going to be positioning the head of the operator and then the position of all the different screens that we're going to be using to run the simulation. Within the setup document, we're also going to choose which modules of Vortex are going to be active and be able to configure various aspects of the simulation before we go and run it inside of our target environment. So that concludes this overview about the different document types of Vortex Studio.